Hi, I'm Grey Tiger, and today we continue the video series where we take a look at the unique mechanics for each of the races in Warhammer 2. Each week we are focusing on a different race, discussing the existing campaign mechanics for that race, along with any unique mechanics for individual factions. Last week we examined the Beastmen, and proposed a few mechanics that may fit them going forward. I did say that I would create a poll from the suggestions, though unfortunately there was not enough feedback to do so. As a new channel, this will undoubtedly be the case each week, so I will instead take the suggestions from all of the videos and make a poll at the end. Now though, we will take a look at Bretonnia, what I consider a rather bland race, though they do have some interesting mechanics. So, grab a goblet of wine and a platter of cheese, and we can see what Bretonnia has to offer. Let's start by taking a look at the mechanics that apply to the race as a whole. Firstly, there is chivalry. It's a value that is shared across your entire faction that can be gained from winning battles. The greater the victory, the more chivalry earned. It is lost when performing unchivalrous actions like sacking settlements and raiding provinces. When your faction reaches certain levels of chivalry, they gain access to increasing bonus effects, and eventually are able to unlock the Green Knight. It's a fitting system, which links nicely to several aspects of the campaign, such as buildings, technologies, and battle outcomes. For one of the Game 1 races, I'd say that this was well implemented, and does not require a major overhaul. Perhaps just some minor Lord-specific interactions, like Luon-Leoncoeur gaining chivalry at a faster rate, or Alberic being able to perform less chivalrous actions without penalty in the name of Manan. Next up is the Knightly Vows system. It allows you to gain reduced upkeep for knights by performing the tasks associated with each vow on lords and heroes. I like this system, though it could do with a bit of fleshing out. I'd like the ability to choose a set of vows that I want my lord or hero to attain, based on interactions with different races on the campaign map. Each of the vows could have different tiers, with requirements being more difficult as you progress. For instance, you may have a vow to cleanse a specific Skaven faction from your lands. The first tier might entail defeating a Skaven army in battle. The second might be to take a settlement owned by that faction, while the highest tier might be to defeat the faction outright. As your characters progress, perhaps they could take on additional vows that reflect the changing campaign map. The different legendary lords could then have their own vows that are unique to them and the campaign goals, to give each faction a little more flavour. The third race-wide mechanic is the peasant economy. For each settlement you control, your armies can sustain an additional 2 peasant units, with your capital able to sustain 8. If you exceed your limit, then your growth and income is affected negatively. I think this is a nice way to represent a feudal lifestyle. I'm sure it could be enhanced, but I'm uncertain what that might entail. If you have any ideas, please comment below. Now, to a mechanic that Bretonnia doesn't have, that I'm surprised that was not included in some form. Though, perhaps Games Workshop and Creative Assembly thought it in bad taste, and it may have been left out for the same reasons that we are now missing Araby. I'm talking about some form of Crusade system. It could work with the player selecting a Crusade target, much like the Greenskins can now select a War target, and then the player is given a certain number of turns to take or destroy that target. Other Bretonnian factions would then pledge forces for the Crusade, which would act like a companion War army, except you choose which units to recruit from several offered by the other factions. The quality of the units offered could vary based on your relationship status with the other factions. Once a Crusade target is taken, then you would gain bonuses for successfully completing the Crusade, and you would gain additional bonuses for as long as you hold that target. The allies of the enemy faction would then see the target city as their priority and try to take it back. Failing to achieve your goals in a crusade could lead to a loss of chivalry and diplomacy penalties with other Bretonnian lords, while succeeding would give additional chivalry and a relationship boost. The Crusade mechanic could support different bonuses for each of the Bretonnian playable lords, such as Luon-Leoncoeur having a greater percentage chance of the other Bretonnian factions pledging troops, or the Fey Enchantress having a bonus applied to the crusading army that increases their abilities in battle. We could also tie the Crusade mechanic into the peasantry system, so that during a crusade you can have additional peasantry units in your armies without penalty. Would you like to see something like this introduced? What additional facets would you add? Now that we have examined the race mechanics, what do the individual lords have to offer? Well, we have 4 lords to look at, so let's find out. Our first legendary lord is Luon Lioncoeur, King of Bretonnia. He has the royal blood effect, but is that enough to be called a faction mechanic? I'd say not, as it's just a few bonuses to the faction in the way of campaign movement and leadership range. There is no interesting interplay with the campaign. As the King of Bretonnia, what could we give him? How about a more complicated and fleshed out diplomacy system, where the lords of the different provinces of Bretonnia have certain tasks or requirements that you have to meet to have them pledge their fealty. Once they have pledged their allegiance, you gain access to standard units and regiments of renown that are specific to that faction and can be recruited at no cost, though they have a longer recruitment time as they are coming from an ally's lands. The fealty system could manifest itself with several tiers, with the more veteran units and better campaign bonuses being available at higher tiers. Once the faction has been confederated, you might lose access to these bonuses, so the player has a tough choice to make. Is it better to maintain relations with the faction, or to confederate and gain access to their lands and armies? We could also give Luon Lioncoeur unique bonuses for the Crusade mechanic, as mentioned before. Perhaps he can call a crusade on factions further away, or has a high percentage chance of other Bretonnian factions pledging elite troops to join the crusade. The second lord we will look at is Alberic de Bordelot, who has the Strength of the Sea bonus effects. Again, these are just a few bonuses to trade and the recruitment of knights. Alberic's law, however, mentions that the province of Bordelot is a land peacefully split over religious matters, with those residing on the coast worshipping Manan, and those inland worshipping the Lady. Perhaps we could give Alberic a system where you pledge before a battle which of the religious beliefs you are honouring, and as a result you gain different bonuses in the battle depending on your faction's favour with that deity. If you win the battle, your favour increases, while losing the battle would result in you losing favour. Over time, if you neglect one of the deities, then you could suffer public order issues in your lands, and your armies could suffer penalties while in battle. As you reach different levels of favour, you could gain access to unique units that serve one of the specific deities, but when in your army, will perform poorly if you do not pledge the battle to their deity. As for his interactions with the Crusade mechanic mentioned earlier, his lore mentions that while his lands are small, he has the best knights, so we could give him the chance to have better knights in the Crusade army, and to give all knights bonuses in battle when fighting against armies of the targeted faction alongside Alberic. Our third legendary lord option is the Fey Enchantress, who leads Carcassonne. She has the bonuses granted by the In Her Lady's Name effect. A more lawful choice perhaps would be the ability to force Bretonnian factions into certain actions. In her lore, it is mentioned that she has the power to replace leaders of the Bretonnian factions, as she did with King Baloim, by directing his Grail Knights to forcefully expel him. We could add a new influence resource of some kind that could be gained from character traits, dilemmas and battles, which can then be spent to perform several actions on Bretonnian factions. The actions could range from recruiting units of knights at no monetary cost, to gaining campaign effects when in that faction's lands, to forcing that faction to confederate at the higher levels. In addition, she can have her own unique interaction with the Crusade mechanic I mentioned earlier, where the Crusade army are bolstered by the presence of the Enchantress, and gain bonuses when fighting armies of the Crusade target. She could even call upon unique units of Grail Knights that no other faction has access to. The final legendary lord is Réponse de Lyonesse, which we received as an FLC lord as part of the Shadow and the Blade release. As she is a newer legendary lord, she already has some unique mechanics. The first of these is the Desert Thirst system, where her armies can avoid desert attrition by spending time garrisoned in settlements where they take on water. A fitting mechanic given her position on the Vortex and Model Empire's maps. Her second mechanic is Errantry Confederation, which makes it easier to confederate certain factions. There is not much to say about this, except maybe we could expand it a little to have a more clear path to how we gain confederation. As for interacting with the proposed Crusade mechanic, she could have bonuses that are applied to her army and the crusading army, which increase the farther they are from the capital. This could represent her questing nature far from home, as mentioned in her lore. So, there we have Bretonnia, and the legendary lords with possible new mechanics on both the race and faction level. I do not know if Creative Assembly plan to revisit Bretonnia at all in the future, but if they do, and they happen to stumble upon this video, perhaps one or two of the ideas mentioned here might find their way into the game. Then of course, there is always the modding community, which continuously creates great new content for us to enjoy, which may take it upon themselves to implement these or similar mechanics. Now, it's time for me to put on my armour, find myself a horse, and ride off to smite evil, in the name of the lady. In the meantime, perhaps you would like to comment and expand on my ideas, or tell me what you would like to see done with Bretonnia if they were to get a future update from CA. Next week, I'll take a look at the current state of chaos. Until then, I'd like to thank you once again for joining me and sticking around to the end of the video. Please comment or like the video and subscribe to the channel, as you'll be letting me know that my content is worth watching by doing so. If you're on Twitter, you can follow me there to get updates on upcoming videos and the development status of my own mods. Finally, I'd just like to plug my latest mod to release on the workshop, the Chieftain of the Deep Warrens, that gives Tretch and Clan Rictus some unique campaign mechanics of their own. Why not check it out if you're a fan of the Skaven? I'd also like to thank Great Book of Grudges for featuring this mod in a recent video, and Broken World Order for highlighting the mod while it was still in development a few weeks ago. They are both great channels with interesting content that is well worth watching. I'm Grey Tiger, and I'll see you next time.